All right, everybody, welcome back. It's the Steel City Blitz Steelers podcast presented by Deck Roofing Incorporated of South Florida. We are very excited to talk to you about the Steelers' 3-0 start and their win over Houston this past weekend. But there's also this large elephant in the room that is the fact that the Pittsburgh Steelers will not be traveling to Tennessee to take on the Titans this weekend due to the COVID-19 pandemic that we are currently in. Several of the Titans players and coaching staff members, organizational members, whatever you want to say, have tested positive, and the NFL has made the decision to not have that game at all this week after it was tinkered around with a little bit about maybe playing it Monday or even Tuesday. There will be no game. The NFL will make a decision on how they're going to make that up, and we'll get into all that because believe me, we all have feelings on this, and we know many in Steelers Nation have strong feelings about this as well. The players too. The players were quite passionate today as well. Joining me as always are Ian and Ben, and I'll just I guess I don't even want to get into the game from Sunday just yet. I think we got to kind of work current event and then go backwards here. Ben, is the NFL making the right call here?
Yeah, I think they are. That's just me. I think that given the fact that they've had successive days of positive testing, they don't really have a choice. I mean, the thing that people need to understand, they need to wrap their arms around before they judge the NFL's action or inaction on this or plan of lack of plan is that this thing has an incubation period. Okay. And that can be different for every person. So, the other shoe is just going to continue to drop. I'm kind of wondering if any of the Vikings are going to test positive now because they played the Titans on Sunday. And I keep wondering if that's going to be the next thing we're going to hear about, is that now there's an outbreak in the Vikings locker room and they've got to reconsider their game on Sunday versus the Texans. Right. So they keep having these guys test positive. Monday they had 3 players and 5 members of the staff that had tested positive. Then they had another player test positive. And then today they had another player and another member of the staff test positive. And the NFL doesn't know when it's going to end.
No.
And until they can identify the people that are infected and know that they're outside that incubation period, they really can't do much with the Titans. And if the Steelers went down there and more players continued to test positive after Sunday or Monday or whenever the hell they had them play, then the Steelers would have to go into quarantine, just like the Vikings are now. It's a mess, man. And there's not a lot you can do about it. It's a virus. You can't try and outsmart it. And you can't just say, well, you tested positive, you're going to go in quarantine, because those guys have been around other people that are within the organization, and they may have infected someone else. So it is what it is. Yes, in short, I think they made the right decision. I don't like it any more than anyone else, but I understand it.
Yeah. Yeah. Ian, where did you come down on this? And not just in terms of was it the right move per se, but why maybe are fans upset when they really shouldn't be right now?
Well, a lot of the commentary I've seen from folks on Twitter and social media is that it's not fair, and the NFL really doesn't care about what's fair. The NFL is trying to get a season in, and the NFL is going to do what they can to get 16 games in for each team one way or the other, or at least some semblance thereof. I've seen some comments about why didn't they schedule in an extra bye week, and to that effect, there was some talk when they put the schedule together that they do have the flexibility that they could push the entire playoffs back a week and essentially eliminate that bye week between the conference championship game and the Super Bowl. And then you would have, basically the regular season would have an extra week, and then the playoffs would start and roll just straight through the playoffs. So there is that flexibility at the end of the year. I think from a scheduling standpoint, people seem upset about, they might have to play 3 games on the road in a row. Well, that's not breaking the NFL's policy. The NFL's scheduling policy is you're allowed to play up to 3 games either at home or on the road at a time. They won't do more than 3, but that's fine. They can do that with the midseason swap with the Ravens.
I think we played 3 on the road last year.
I think
in
we
a row.
did. Yeah. And the other thing to mention is that with using that Ravens game as a swap in week 7 and week 8, that if the Steelers had to have another game canceled or postponed in the second half of the season, that doesn't all of a sudden eliminate the possibility of making that game up in that week 18. That if you automatically move the Steelers-Titans game all the way down to week 18, then you're eliminating that as a possibility for a potential future game getting canceled. And you're really putting yourself in a bind. So I think the NFL is waiting to see what happens with Minnesota. As long as Minnesota is okay to play this week, I think they'll just make that swap with the Steelers-Ravens game and be fine. But if, like Ben mentioned, the Minnesota-Houston game has to get postponed, then they're going to have to mess with a whole bunch of other teams' schedules too. So the Steelers one is easy, but they're also looking at that one before they make a final decision. And, just flipping games in week 7 and week 8 keeps all the changes basically in the top half of the schedule, that if something needs to happen with a future game, there's still that flexibility at the end of the year. And like Ben said, we're in a pandemic. It's not a normal situation.
No,
and this is a virus. It's not like an STD or something that how it gets transmitted. It's an airborne disease. There's a variety of different ways that you can catch it. A coronavirus in and of itself. I'm not a virologist or anything like that, but a coronavirus, there are common cold viruses that are coronaviruses, not the same as this one, obviously, but they're of a similar type.
Right.
And as pretty much anyone can attest, you can get a common cold in any variety of number of ways, regardless of if you wash your hands all the time, if you're wearing masks, if you're trying to social distance. You can just pick up a cold, in a variety of different ways. So similar with this, that it's a virus, and there's a variety of different ways it can be picked up. It's not necessarily that the Titans or anyone in their organization did something wrong. It's not necessarily that, Tennessee is at fault here. They just, people caught a virus and now it's spreading in their locker room, and the NFL is doing the safe thing, kind of like what Major League Baseball did. We saw baseball have to cancel some games early in the season. Obviously, baseball is a little bit easier to make up because you're able to play double headers. You can play games closer to each other than you can with football, which is basically a once a week game just because of the wear and tear on the body. And the other thing I'll mention is that, baseball had these taxi squads that were essentially extra roster players that they could call in, but those guys were off site. They weren't working with the team. The NFL, yes, they have expanded practice squads, but those practice squad players are in the same facility, going through the same workouts, in all the same meetings as the team. So you can't just bench the guys that test positive for COVID and plug in some practice squad players, because they've all been in the same facility with all the same people. So it's not like you have this group of guys who have been held out in Knoxville or Memphis and you can suddenly bring them over to Nashville and be like, we know these guys are clean, they're going to play the game. It's not like that for how football is set up.
And I think that as a matter of fact, the majority of players in Tennessee that have tested positive, I think, have been practice squad guys, if I'm not mistaken. There was a tight end practice squad guy, and then at least one or two others. Going back to Ben's point, and this is what I think Steelers Nation has to really consider. If you're angry now that the Pittsburgh Steelers are not going to play this weekend, okay, as we all are, imagine how upset you'd be if the NFL said, let's go ahead and play this game. We think everything's under control. And 5 or 6 days later, you started to have guys with symptoms and then ultimately with positive tests. I mean, can you imagine the anger at that point? And let's not forget, we have a running back who is a cancer survivor. I don't think Mike Tomlin's in any hurry to stick him in there either. So I'm not crazy about this. I try to plan my fall weekends around the Steelers as much as possible.
Right.
But I'm not losing my mind. I'm not going to go to Tennessee and start pointing fingers at guys, unless it's proven that these guys went out clubbing or something stupid. then I'm not going to worry about it right now. Because as Ian pointed out, this is an airborne thing. I can get it going to the grocery store, as much as anywhere else. So I think too, it's the right call. I think they're avoiding further complications here. But Ben, if you were going to lay money in a casino that this is going to happen again through the course of this season, would you do so?
Yes.
Yeah.
Honestly, my friends and I talked about this before the season started. My friend Johnny, fuck you, Johnny, and I were talking before the season started, and he didn't think there was going to be a season.
Yeah.
And, he was wrong, but, we both agreed that there was going to be a point where there might be a game canceled or postponed or rearranged. And we just both hoped that it didn't happen to the Steelers. Well,
of course
it did.
Yeah.
It's going to happen to somebody. We just got unlucky, and it is what it is. Like I said, I'm not happy about it, but I think the right decision is being made here. I think they were playing with fire, trying to schedule the game anyway. I thought that 2 days ago. And now that they've gone ahead and said, we're continuing to see positive results. Obviously, we're not making the right decision by trying to schedule this. We're gonna go ahead and give in to whatever you want to call it, fate, Mother Nature, science, whatever.
Yeah.
They're giving into the circumstances. They're acknowledging the situation that they're in, and they're going, we're going to have to reschedule this game. It is what it is.
Yeah. I would be curious to see what would have happened if the weeks didn't work out quite as well as it appears that they're going to in terms of that week 7, week 8 switcheroo with Baltimore. But it's really not worth going too deep into because it is what it is. That's the way it is. But I just think that maybe we got spoiled. Maybe we had 3 weeks of NFL football. Everything seemed to be going well, and it just all of a sudden this comes up, and it's like, oh man, it just maybe we got spoiled because things happened so quickly with baseball. They were getting positive cases as quickly as that first and second week, and so I don't know. I'm just kind of at a loss. I wish people weren't so upset about it. Maybe our maturity, our years on this planet have given us the grace to understand these decisions, and that we don't like them, but we accept them, and people are just fired up. But Ian, did you have any final comments on this before we talk some actual football here?
Yeah, one final thought, that if there's any coach in the National Football League that I would want to lead my team through a situation like this, Mike Tomlin's, if he's not at the top of that list, he's near the top, because he always has a very sort of even demeanor. And I mean, obviously Bill Belichick's the best coach in the league, but in a situation like this where things are changing rapidly, an even-keeled guy like Tomlin is perfect for this situation.
Agreed.
I mean, even last year, when they wanted to ask him questions about whatever, and he's like, guys, we're 1-4 going into a Monday night game with a 4th-string quarterback. Let me focus on that. I don't care about any of this off-field stuff. They would ask him some question about Twitter. He's like, guys, I don't care. I'm focused on the game, and he does. And you've heard that from the team this year about taking it one game at a time, and trying to drown out all the noise and everything else. That he's got them laser focused this year on the goal of winning the Super Bowl. And he is an excellent coach in situations like these where there's randomness and uncertainty, and able to keep his guys focused.
Yeah, you're right, and he already nailed it today. He was asked about it, and the possibility of having 13 straight games without a bye, and he said, "We do not care. It is what it is. They will move forward." And Ian, I know you pointed out earlier today that the Ben Roethlisberger going to the Super Bowl 3 times, each of those years, the Steelers had early byes. So, granted, that was in the past, but it's still something to pay attention to. And as far as coming out of the game with the Texans, I did want to talk a little bit about the injuries and then how this could impact positively, at least right now. Derek Watt, I don't know, guys. Did they mention the Watt brothers at all this past week? I really don't remember. He ends up with
Wait, they're brothers?
Yeah, I know, it's crazy, huh? They had the same parents.
Whoa. No way.
Yeah, he has a grade 1, grade 2 hamstring.
Grade 2 hamstring.
It is a grade 2. Okay.
Grade 2 hamstring strain. Excuse me.
Okay. And he definitely would not have played this week. And then Marcus Allen, who has done a very nice job on special teams, has plantar fasciitis, which
Allen's actually he's done okay as a linebacker too. He's impressed me. He's not great, but he's done okay.
No, and he's the plantar fasciitis stuff. For those of you that don't know, that's just excruciating pain on the bottom of the foot.
It is miserable.
It is. There's the doctor will say, here's a tennis ball. Go home and roll this around with your foot. And so that's one of those things that he had a little bit better chance this week than did Watt, but I think it was still going to be slim. And then, of course, you had Deontay Johnson, who exited Sunday with concussion protocol. Mike Tomlin reiterated that's where he was. Now, the beats were saying today, I think Joe Rudder and Mark Cavalli were both saying he was in helmet and was pretty much active with everybody, doing what everybody else was doing today.
Yeah, but he's still in the protocol. And people need to understand that part of the protocol is you go out and you work out in pads and you physically exert yourself, and then they test you again to see if you still have concussion symptoms. So him practicing doesn't really mean anything. But I think to your point about him having a concussion, he's about to have 4 days off. Mm-hmm. I got a feeling by next week he's going to be fine.
I do too.
But he'll be tested regardless.
Yeah.
And speaking of testing, one other note though, the Steelers do have 4 days off now because it's their bye week, but the players have to come into the facility every day to get their COVID test because they're still doing daily COVID tests. So it's not like they can go home and leave the city or anything like that.
Why do they have to go into the facility and get tested? Why can't they get tested someplace else? I don't understand that part of it, but whatever.
Well, I'm just going to guess here. I would think it just has to do something with the regularity of the testing, the same doctors, people doing it, something to that effect, keep it all in-house. I'm guessing that's probably what it is. But, just for those that don't know, when NFL teams reach their bye week, it is very common that players will immediately hop on a plane and take off somewhere.
Yep.
They will go back home. They will go on vacation with families. They will go just to go do whatever.
Whatever.
Yep. And that ain't happening. And you saw some reactions today. Eric Ebron is not thrilled. He had already planned for his son's birthday party in the week during the bye week coming up later in the year. So he's not happy. And, again, Eric, I totally understand. I get it. But, man, this is way better than you guys going to Tennessee, playing a game, winning or losing, and then coming home and being positive. So I get the frustration, but this definitely is better, okay? As far as the game this past Sunday, look, the Steelers are 3-0. We'll take it. We'll run with it every single time. It doesn't matter if they'd won every game 2-0, 3-2. No, nobody cares. You're 3-0. It's the NFL. It's about winning games. Ben, what is concerning to you through these first three games right now?
Well, the defensive backfield seems to be having some communication issues. And in particular, last week versus the Texans, there were some issues where guys weren't covered. And it was the same thing versus the Broncos. So I don't think they've got it dialed in yet. And, it's fine. It's early. It is, they're going to work these things out. We've talked about this before. There was no preseason. The camp didn't really lend itself to being a cohesive time for the team to, get together and work these things out. So I don't think that there was a lot of cohesion that went on there, and it seems to be showing up to play. Ben Roethlisberger still is a bit inaccurate and inconsistent, in particular downfield.
Mm-hmm.
Ben was 0 for 8 on passes that traveled more than 15 yards through the air last week.
Yeah.
He was not good. And I can't explain why. I don't really get it. But that's got to improve. I expect that it will. It's kind of still knocking off the rust. That's one.
Yeah, I think so too.
One more downside to not playing this week is I really felt like he would get some more of that knocked off, and he's not going to play, so he won't.
Yeah.
But I still think it was the right decision, regardless at this point. So those are the two things, the two big things for me. I would have been nervous about the offensive line, given the fact that there are some pieces that have been moved around and replaced already.
Yeah.
Chuks Okorafor seems to be a pretty nice pass blocker. I like him so far. He's not great as a run blocker, but I'm okay with that. And Mr. Filer over there at left guard is not great in pass protection.
No.
But is good as a run blocker, which is what you need out of your guards. So maybe he's better suited as a guard than he is as a tackle. But I think regardless, Filer's gone at the end of the year. He's going to make some money on the open market, and the Steelers aren't going to be able to re-sign him. In fact, I don't think they're going to try after they've seen Kevin Dotson go out there on the field and do what he did. I think they're just going to go, yeah, Dotson, you're going to pencil you in right there.
Young man, that's your spot.
Yeah, we're not going to have the kind of depth that we have along the offensive line this year in 2021, but it's still going to be a good group. I don't think Al's going to come back either, but I expect that what they're probably going to do is end up putting Chuks over there on the left tackle, and then having Banner and maybe somebody else duke it out for the right tackle spot.
Could be Gerald Hawkins. He
could be
in as the extra tackle eligible.
Tackle,
he did some nice things.
Yeah, he looks nice as a run blocker. He really does. I agree with you. I think he could be hanging around for a little bit. That's nice. It's good. But there aren't a lot of concerns, little nagging things like James Conner. I thought last week versus the Texans, his burst was improved. I don't think he's quite 100% yet. It's just my instinct. That tremendous burst of speed that you have, his quickness, just isn't quite there yet. He's never been a burner with good long speed, but he's not running away from anybody. Let's put it that way. But he can pop through a hole real fast and get 3 or 4 yards before anybody touches him. And that part's just been missing this year. But I think that'll come. I really do. I get my instinct is just that he's not 100% healthy. The defensive front looks great. The linebackers look pretty damn good, even with some shortcomings with Vince. So I'm pretty happy with where they're at right now, bearing in mind that they haven't even come close to hitting their peak yet, and they don't want to be peaking right now anyway. So it's fine. Not having a bye right in the middle of the season kind of sucks, but as Ian pointed out earlier today, the 3 years that this team has gone to the Super Bowl, the Ben Roethlisberger years, they always had an early bye. So maybe there's something to be said for that.
Ian, I'll ask you for any concerns that you have, and I know there aren't many when you're 3-0, but I would also say this, and you kind of mentioned this early with Mike Tomlin. Tomlin has been around the block, and he knows how to handle these types of situations. So I can see later in the season, when they don't have that bye week that they hoped they'd had, I can see him doing some things differently just to keep the guys fresh and stuff. But what are your overall concerns right now?
I think Ben did a great job summarizing pretty much all of them. So I think the punting game is still a slight concern, although we won a Super Bowl with the guy with a lob wedge for a leg. Mcfarland, yeah. So, I mean, punting can be a little overblown, but situationally, Colquitt hasn't been much better than Barry was. But yeah, Ben pretty much hit on all the rest of them. The one thing I did want to talk about was Anthony Mcfarland getting in the game for the first time and showing some nice flashes.
Go right ahead and discuss him.
6 carries for 42 yards. Yeah. And I mean, Ben talked about Connor's burst. Mcfarland showed some really nice bursts. That there were a couple off tackle runs that, watching the play live, I saw the hole open up. Mcfarland was still in the backfield, and I was like, well, here comes the linebacker. He's going to get tackled. And he was through the hole before the linebacker got there and turned it into a 7 or an 8 yard gain when most running backs would probably get stopped in the hole for 1 or 2 yards. And that was definitely eye-opening. And I thought they had a really good distribution of labor in the backfield. That Connor had 18 carries, Mcfarland had 6, Snell had 7. Like, that's a really good distribution of work out of the backfield. Snell got the short yardage work, except for one time when they gave it to Mcfarland on a 3rd and 1. But I think what happened there,
they gave it to Samuels once.
Samuels, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was Samuels on a 3rd and 1, and it was awful.
Yeah,
well, I think it was there was one Mcfarland got too, I believe, but I think they were in a hurry up situation, and Ben tried to rush them to the line, and the running back got stuck in there, and then they went for it on 4th down and made it with Connor, I believe. And so that's, those things can happen. Ben Roethlisberger has been in the league for a long time, and if he sees something and wants to go hurry up and try and exploit something in the defense, I'm willing to trust him, even if it's giving the ball to a 5'9", 180-pound running back. But that being said,
a little more than that, a little bit more,
just a little.
We
talked earlier in the year about, what's the ideal distribution in the backfield. And I think we kind of found it in this game that you let Connor be the workhorse, you sprinkle in Mcfarland for those change of pace situations, and then use Benny Snell as your short yardage hammer and in the 4th quarter to wear teams down. And by the way, the Steelers, we often talk about our 4-minute offense, that a situation where you get the ball back, you're up by a score, you don't need a score, you just need to run the clock out at the end of the game. And they've struggled with that for years.
Yes.
And they ran it to perfection this past week. They got the ball back with about 4.5 minutes, and Houston didn't even sniff getting the ball again for the rest of the game. And part of it is that Houston's run defense is just absolutely dreadful, but the Steelers did everything they needed to do to close that game out and not give Deshaun Watson another chance with the ball. And that was great to see.
One of those was a pretty gutsy play call to throw the ball on was it a 3rd or a 4th down?
It was 4th down to Claypool, right?
I think it was.
Yeah, I call. I mean, that was so bad, man. And I can't believe Roby stood there like, what did I do? I'm like, dude, you tackled him before the ball got there.
Well, that's not the one I'm thinking about. I know what you're talking about there, but I'm talking about on that final drive. Didn't we throw a pass for a 1st down?
It was 3rd and 9. Yeah, it was 3rd and 9.
Yeah. Okay, so it wasn't that gutsy because you really had to throw the ball, but I mean, it was one of those throws that Ben just zipped right in there and 1st down, game over. As far as Mcfarland, real quick, he was on the field for 10 snaps and he had 7 touches, 6 rushes and 1 reception, I believe. And he is, it's not a knock on James Conner or Benny Snell or Jalen Samuels, but man, when Mcfarland gets the ball, it's a blur compared to those guys. And it's a welcome blur, and I can't even imagine what it must be like to the defense, who's seen those other 2 or 3 guys play after play, and then here comes Mcfarland, zip, zip, zip. So I love it. I hope they keep that distribution up.
Now let me ask you this though.
Yeah.
Does it occur to either one of you watching Benny Snell play that he's really concentrating on not losing the ball instead of getting downfield, and that maybe he's preoccupied and it's in his head? You know what I mean?
I think it was Sunday.
I thought it was too, and I didn't think he performed very well because of it. I wondered as I was watching him if he wasn't thinking about, I'm going to lose the ball, and he's got himself psyched out. I don't know. I hope not, but it seemed a little odd to me the way he entered the hole, where before he would just zip right into it.
Well, and you guys both know this, that when you're when you're a little little league player, Pop Warner, when you get into middle school and high school, coaches will tolerate you fumbling the ball if you're one of these amazing athletes that's going to go off to college and maybe the pros. You're going to be able to get away with that crap. When you get to the pros, if you can't hang on to the ball, you're not playing. There's very few instances where guys had fumbleitis and would keep getting the rock, so to speak. And yeah, I'm with you, man. I'm with you. I thought he looked very tentative going into the line of scrimmage.
He did.
With the ball.
He had two hands on the ball pretty much the whole time. He was not even trying to stiff arm guys or get around guys. Yeah.
And just, putting it in context, most of those were short yardage attempts, and he was going to get hit early. I get it, but it just looked to me like he was a little scared.
No, I agree. I don't even think it's a question. I think there was definitely some hesitation, shall we say, on his part.
To his credit, though, he picked up 2 of the 3 short yardage situations.
Yeah,
that there's a 3rd and 1. He got 1 yard on a great second effort where he kept his legs moving. And then there was another 3rd and 1 in the 4th quarter that he picked up on our touchdown drive. The only one he didn't get was 1st and goal from the 1 where he got stuffed for no gain. So both 3rd downs that he got the ball on a 3rd and 1, he converted. Mm-hmm. So those are obviously we would like to see him score the touchdown, but the 3rd and 1s kept his drives alive too.
And let's stay on the offensive side of the ball. Obviously with Deontay Johnson going out in the first half, that certainly changes things as far as how Randy Fiegner wants to run his rotations and stuff with his receivers. At the end of the day, Chase Claypool was on the field for more snaps offensively than anybody else in the receiver department. Ben, do you make anything of that, or do you just look at it like that's just kind of the way the game fell at that particular point?
No, I don't make much of it other than the fact that Johnson was out and that Claypool picked up his snaps. I mean, that was what it was. I didn't think all that much about it. I don't know. Did you?
I think a little bit about it because I think when the average fan looks at that and they see, whoa, wait a minute, why was he on the field, like, let's say, for more snaps than Juju was?
I mean, he also played 9 special team snaps.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
On top of that, of the 61 he played on offense.
Right.
I was surprised that he was on the field more than Juju was, but Juju also had a gimpy knee last week.
That's
and
true.
So he may have been in a pitch count. I can't say. I know they wanted to get James Washington more involved this last week. I didn't think they were all that successful in doing so.
No.
But Ben targeted him. Obviously,
he did.
He just didn't hit him. He just because those were all those 15-yard plus routes I was talking about before, where Ben was not very accurate. So I'm not playing too much on that because of the circumstances.
Right.
It's cool that they believe in Claypool.
Definitely,
it bodes well for the future. But what did he have?
1 catch for 24 yards.
He had 1 catch,
which was that big one at the end of the game.
Yeah, but he had 4 targets. Let's see. Juju had 5. Connor had 5. Washington had 7. So that really speaks a little more to it.
Yeah, I think it also speaks to the kid himself that they believe that much in him to get him on there. If Ben Roethlisberger didn't have the confidence in him, I don't think he'd be out there. So I think
that's part of it. It's also his position coach, his coordinator.
Yeah.
Obviously Ben, but Ben's not throwing the ball as often as he's throwing the other guys. Ebron had 7 targets.
Yeah.
And 1 drop. And it wasn't a great pass on that drop.
It wasn't. A little behind him.
It was a little bit behind him, but he got 2 hands on it. You got to come down with that. You're a professional football player. You have got to come down with that ball. Even if you don't get any yak at all, you got to come down with it. And, he's not exactly known for his hands or his blocking, which sucks.
That's it. We knew coming in he wasn't going to be a great blocker, but
I mean,
speaking of blocking, though, that's where Claypool has been really good. And given how much they were running the ball, I think that
Claypool
also
likes to block, doesn't he?
Yeah,
I think he
that
loves
also
it.
led to Claypool's snap count, that they were confident putting him in there on running plays. And they've done a few things with Claypool where they'll bring him in motion into the slot and have him crack back against a linebacker or a safety and move guys out of the box to create a running lane on the outside. So that's also led to him getting on the field. And speaking of blocking too, Vance Mcdonald's been really good at blocking this year. We had some concerns in that department last year, but he's been very solid.
We had some gripes last year, and this year it's like he took 2019 personally, and I don't mean what the fans have to say about him. I don't think he probably is all that concerned about it, but I think maybe he took his own performance personally. He grew the hair out and grew the beard, and he seems to be, a little tougher and nastier. And he had a really nice game on Sunday.
He did.
He really did.
Yeah. He did. He looked like the Vanimal of old.
Didn't he?
Yeah. Ian, I'm going to flip over to the defensive side of the ball because this was a guy you were talking about today in our group chats. Mike Hilton is having a hell of a season through the first 3 games.
He did give up a touchdown, though.
What's that?
Give up a touchdown. He gave up a touchdown on Sunday.
He did, and I'm not going to discount that. I wrote that in one of the quick hitters this week as well, that he got behind, he stumbled, and he didn't have a chance. But he seems to be in the right place at the right time in a lot of these instances.
Yep.
What are you seeing in his game? I mean, he just is it just a simple matter of he's just playing well, he's getting put in the right spots? What's going on with him?
A little of both, but I mean, a lot of both, actually. I mean, he's playing really well. He's got tackles for loss. He had our only interception of the game, which came at a huge moment on a 3rd and 15 on a deep ball into the red zone. And we talked last week about how Deshaun Watson can make plays out of the pocket with his feet down the field.
He was trying to do.
And like we've seen with Ben Roethlisberger over the years, sometimes those turn into big plays and sometimes those turn into interceptions. And that was actually a play. And tomorrow I'll have a post up on, kind of breaking down what happened on that play. But Hilton lined up as the slot corner on that play, but at the snap basically turned around, and it was like Troy Polamalu, like Captain Ginyard into his body, and he ran. Hilton's spot on that play was as the deep high safety. It was a cover 3 look. They showed cover 2 before the snap, but it was actually cover 3. But neither Minka or Edmonds dropped deep. It was Hilton that ran kind of between them and took the deep spot on the field. And then he made a play on the ball where he basically just outran Kenny Stills, who is not a slow guy, to the spot where Watson threw the ball. And he was, so in the preseason, when we heard stories of, the Steelers are trying Mike Hilton at safety, and, everyone's like, oh, that's never going to happen. He's a small guy. They need him at slot corner. But it's things like that where you try things like that in in training camp to get guys used to, okay, you're not going to line up as a safety necessarily, but if we want to call a defense where you're covering, the center third of the field, or you're the single high free safety, are we comfortable with that rotation, and can you do it? And things like that with Hilton, with Cam Sutton's done that a few times, really can mess with a quarterback, because when the quarterback comes to the line, looks over the defense, sees 2 safeties 15 yards off the line, like, okay, I've got cover 2. Then all of a sudden, the guy who was the slot corner is the deep safety. You're like, what the heck am I seeing out here? So it really messes with what a quarterback sees. And the other factor in that play was Ola Adeniyi getting just a tiny bit of pressure and forcing Watson to step up. And when he stepped up, Cam Hayward looped around and basically cut off his escape route. And then Watson just had to bring his eyes down and turn and bolt for the sideline. And by the time he got back into a situation where he felt like he could throw the ball, really the only option he had downfield was to try and force something in there. And Hilton just made a better play than Kenny Stills did on the ball.
Yeah. And I did want to slide this over to Ben a little bit too. comment on Hilton if you want to, Ben, but what were the changes? And Tomlin said they were minor, but clearly they did something different at halftime because Deshaun Watson was having his way with that defense. They come back in the second half. I think they only gave up 51 total yards in the second half. What did you see that these minor tweaks may have been?
Well, two things, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
One, the pass rushers stayed in their rush lanes. They weren't giving these gaping holes for Watson to either see through, find receivers through, or run through if he needed to escape. So they did a little better job of keeping him in the pocket in the second half. And second, they did a better job of disguising whether or not they were running man, zone, what kind of zone. They just did a better job of disguising things. And yeah, maybe it was minor. Maybe it was simply a matter of better execution in the second half. But they did a much, much, much better job in the second half of defending that team, obviously, than they did in the first. And, whatever those minor things were, got them off the field quickly, which kept them rested, which got them back into the game rested, which gave them the advantage they needed to continue to perform that way. So, hey, more power to them. In-game adjustments are what coordinators are supposed to be paid for.
Yeah.
And when they don't make them, God knows we criticize the hell out of them. So, when they do make them, we got to give them credit.
If and Ian, you mentioned Ola Adeniyi. Ben, what have you thought about him and the rookie Alex Highsmith? They seem to be pretty confident with giving those guys minutes to spell Dupree and Watt.
I think Highsmith is going to be. I don't want to use the word special yet, but I think he's going to be above average at his position in the NFL. I really do. And I think it's just that worker-like attitude. This is a guy who practices his craft. He's not the best athlete out there, but technically he's very sound. And he's learning the NFL game at this point, and he's already competent.
Yes.
Now, a guy like Ola is a lot more physically gifted than Highsmith, and is finally getting to the point where things are slowing down for him enough that he can anticipate what the tackles are going to do, what the quarterback is going to do, and he's able to take advantage of that.
Right. So
he actually, in my opinion, Ola has an opportunity to be better than Highsmith. Is a higher ceiling than Highsmith, but I think that Highsmith's going to end up being the better player at the end of the day, and that's just instinct. There's really no sound reason for me to believe that's the case. It's just my instinct.
Yeah, there was a moment where Highsmith was getting blocked right at the point of attack, and David Johnson was kind of coming downhill at him, and I was really impressed. He stacked up that blocker, shed him, and gave a very solid hit on Johnson for what I would call either no gain or a yard loss. And that's when it kind of struck me as, okay, if this kid can do that on the edge, then I think we're on to something here. In his case. Ian, I completely flamed on what I was going to ask you, but I know what it was. Jesus. Can you tell I'm old? Uncle Ed Bouchette wrote an article today in theathletic.com, and readers are asking him, hey, what's going on with Minka? What's going on with Bush? They seem to think that because these guys don't have, a bunch of interceptions, forced fumbles, sacks, that they're not playing well. What is your take on those two guys through 3 games?
I think they're both playing well. I think they've done some different things with Minkah this year than they did last year even. And a lot of them are subtle things that you don't pick up watching the regular broadcast that you really have to kind of watch the all 22 to be able to see, just because you can't see safeties on the regular TV broadcast. And that's one of the reasons why I will always defend liking watching football in person more than watching it on TV, because you can't see what the safeties are doing. True. And that's a big part of what a defense will give up and what you can do. So some of it is, quarterbacks are throwing away from Minkah, that they're just not going towards him. But there's other times, going back to the Denver game, Denver was having a lot of success of throwing those kind of shallow crossing routes across the middle of the field. And the Steelers did make an adjustment in the second half of that game and put Minkah in some robber situations where he kind of sunk down into the middle and was basically just sitting on that route ready to pick it off. And those were like the 2 times in that game that Jeff Driscoll didn't throw that ball. So if Driscoll had thrown that ball, which was working for him all game, Minkah's probably still running. But they have been able to move him around. Like I mentioned, the thing with Hilton, last year that would have just been Minkah dropping back to the deep safety position and covering the center of the field. But on that play, they had Minkah and Edmonds as the underneath defenders, basically planted their heels 15 yards from the line of scrimmage, and it was a 3rd and 15, and said, okay, if anything gets dumped off in front of them, they're the guys that are going to run in and tackle the catch and keep the guys short of the first down. So, they've matched him up on some slot receivers, given him some man opportunities. So they have moved him around a bit more schematically than they did last year, which sometimes when you do that, that takes guys out of plays, or quarterbacks can throw away from them a little bit too. Devin Bush is second on the team in tackles, and he's got 3 passes defended. He's still got some work to do in his pass coverage. Part of it too, though, is that watching the game just on the broadcast, some things you may think are Bush's fault in coverage are not. There were a couple sort of breaking dig routes that Bush was the one that made the tackle on, but it was actually either the slot corner or the outside guy's man to cover. And, the pass got thrown, and Bush was the one who made the tackle because he tracked from the middle of the field outside to the ball and was fast enough to be the first one that got there. So it looked like it was his fault initially, but it was actually not, because it wasn't his guy to cover. So some of it's that too. Bush has given up a couple touchdowns in coverage. Yes. So he's got some work to do, but I have no qualms about Devin Bush's game at this point, being a second-year player. He's everything we hoped he would be so far, trading up to draft him 10th overall. And Minkah was still absolutely worth making the trade of the first-round pick for. Yeah. So I have no problems with where either of those guys are at.
And it's a good point you make, too, that I think fans do this. They'll see a guy tackle a receiver after a catch, and they'll just automatically assume it was his guy. And that's not always the case. Just remember that. As we wind things down here, Ben, this was scheduled on Sunday to be a 1:00 game, which of course means for you breakfast with the Steelers. That's a 10 a.m. start. So I guess everybody wants to know, what are you going to be doing on Sunday? Now, what are you going to do?
I'm probably going to watch Browns Cowboys, I guess. Now,
oh, wow. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's not going to be good football, and
I don't think so either.
I don't really know who I would root for at this point, but either way, I know somebody I hate is going to lose. So. Fine.
Ian, what'll you be partaking in this weekend?
I don't know. I have a free weekend now, so we'll see. One other thing before we go, Tyson Alualu has been so good this year. Yeah. We were a little worried about losing Javon Hargrave, but Alualu has been so good in the front of that defense that we have not missed Javon Hargrave really that much at all.
At all?
No.
I watched.
Alualu has been money.
He has.
He's not as quick as Hargrave, but he's so strong. Oh,
Yeah, very
crazy.
strong, very smart.
Yeah, he tosses around centers like they're rag dolls. I'm like, God, that guy needs more one-on-ones.
Yeah, I watched a little bit of Javon in the Eagles Bengals game last week, and I mean he's still quick, but he didn't do a whole lot on there to make me think, geez, I wish we had him back. I mean, I love the kid, loved him coming out, but the Steelers made a business decision there, and I think so far it's paying off. So
it's fine. They couldn't have paid him. They couldn't afford it.
No,
it is what it is.
Yeah.
But God, the Eagles stink. They're awful.
That is a really
the whole NFC East, man. They're terrible.
It is.
Washington is leading that division at 1-2.
Yeah. What is the? I've seen it the other day. They're 2-9-1. Who got a tie?
The Bengals and the Eagles.
The Bengals and Eagles.
Oh, God.
They ended up tying. Yeah. Doug Peterson again with some. I don't know. Some people question his decision making at the end, but playing for more of a tie than a loss or a win. But what are you going to do? Anyway, you
stinking it up.
He's struggling, man. He's
making Baker Mayfield look like a good quarterback.
Well, the Trevor Lawrence sweepstakes are suddenly getting really, really interesting now.
Yeah,
I mean, you've got a bunch of 0-3 teams right now, and a bunch of 1-2 teams. But you've been listening to the Steel City Blitz Steelers podcast presented by Deck Roofing Incorporated, which, of course, serves Broward and the southern Palm Beach counties, whether it's commercial, residential, multifamily, or condos. Contact Deck Roofing today at deckroofing.com. Gentlemen, that's it. We will reconvene next week hopefully prior to a Week 5 game, which will be against the aforementioned Philadelphia Eagles. That'll be fun. Yeah, they're not good. They're not playing well. The Pittsburgh Steelers should be fresh. They should be hungry, and we should beat the Philadelphia Eagles. But we'll talk much more about that next week. So for the guys, this is Steel Dead signing off on the Steel City Blitz Steelers podcast. And hey, go Steelers.
Ravens suck.